Hi everyone, in today's session we are going to look at how functional interface works. So before we get into detail of how functional interface really works for the different types of functional interface we have, let's understand a simple example with the interface. So in this example, we have an interface called operation. So this operation has one abstract method which takes two arguments, and this is going to add those arguments together and returns the value as an integer. And so how we are going to implement this method is we are going to write a class called test operation, which is implementing this interface. So once you are implementing the interface is a place where you are actually implementing the abstract methods. So how many ever abstract methods this interface has, you're implementing all the methods will be implemented here. So now we have uh, created a method called add, and which takes two arguments, and all we are going to do is like we have put the expression here which adds two numbers and then returns the results. Then now all we are going to do is we are going to use this class and call this method. So if I have to call this method inside this class, all I have to do, first step I have to do is to create an object. Once I've created this object, all I'm doing is I'm just calling this method add, just passing these arguments 10 and 15. So as and when I pass these arguments, when I click on add, it goes to this method implementation, and which takes two parameters 10 and 15, adds 10 and 15 here and returns the result as 25. Let's run this example and see what result we are getting. Let's scroll it down while it's executing. Hopefully we'll get 25. Let it run. Yeah, 25 is the result we get when you add two numbers together. So this is how a normal interface works. So why do we need an interface first? Because implementation might change at any point in during the time, during the initial design cycle. So we don't want to decide how the implementation can work in the initial stages itself. So as and when whoever the programmer who implements that interface, they can decide how they are going to solve that problem. So that's why we use actually interface here. So now let's look at functional interface. So what the benefit of functional interface is? Functional interface is the interface which has only one abstract method. If you have more than one abstract method, that's not called functional interface. So I've just defined this interface operation as a functional interface. But let's say I have more than one abstract method. This is an abstract method which does not have any implementation. So if I have one more abstract method which is going to do the same thing called add, but instead of taking integer, it's going to take double value, and then it just adds it together. But if I add one more abstract method, then it throws an error because it says that this is not a functional interface. So now our goal is to learn how does a functional interface works. So we are going to comment this additional uh, abstract method, and let's look at how we can implement the same add operation in a much simpler way using functional interface. So let's look at a normal functional interface. Let me look at this one. Okay, so let me do the same thing using a functional interface. So if you look at this, it says BiFunction, and name of this functional interface is add functional interface. And if you look at it here, this is a lambda expression which takes two arguments, number one and number two, from the call function, and this is passed as a parameter, and this number one, number two are added up together, and the values returned back. Okay, and this whole thing is called lambda expression. Now, the name of this functional interface is add functional interface, and what are the parameters this add functional interface takes. It takes two parameters, integer and integer, and this is a return type of this functional interface, which is actually the sum. This is num1 and this is num2. So all we are going to do is we don't have to write functional interface and then have a class which implements that interface and then come back and then create an object and then call that method. So but all we are going to do is we're going to do everything in a single step here, and we're just going to say that add functional interface, add functional interface, which has a call called apply. So when you look at apply, what it says, it's going to take two arguments. One is t, another one is u. Both are of data type integers. So let's input that value. So let's input 10, 15 and put it in a sysout so that we can see the results. Let's type it system dot println, go to the end, to brace, and run this. Hopefully we should get the same result. Yeah, we got the same result as 25. So now let's look at different variations of functional interface. Now we know that what is functional interface. So so this is a bifunctional interface, this is a normal functional interface. So what's the difference between a bifunctional interface and normal functional interface? So functional interface takes one input and returns an output. In bifunction, it takes two inputs and returns an output. It could be of any data type. So functional interface does not determine what is the input argument it take and what is the output argument it should, what is the output result and output it should give actually. But here the only difference is the number of arguments this interface can take. So here, since it's a functional interface which takes single input, so here we are taking an integer and let's say we convert this into a string. And so the name of the functional interface, we are calling it as convert to string functional interface. So what is the input we are taking? The input taking is an integer. So it is num. We don't have to specify the data type of num because we already know that the input which is coming here is integer. And this is a lambda expression which converts this num into a string just to prove that this what we added is a string, uh, and we are going to concatenate saying that is a string. So let's call this function called convert string to functional interface and see what happens. Let's write the whole stuff here. System println. Let's put this. Just apply. If you look at apply, what we just saw is going to take an integer. Okay, let's see, put an integer, say 123. Okay, so it throws error because I've inputted a string. I should be inputting a integer. So let's remove the quotes. Yeah, now let's run it. Hopefully we see 123 is a string. So what we did, we passed an integer 123 to a functional interface which takes an integer and got converted into a string. Yeah, if you look at the output, we see 123 is a string. So now let's look at some more variation of this functional interface. So now let's summarize. We looked at two couple of things. One is a functional interface we looked at, and another one we looked at is a bifunctional interface. And so now let's look at some more variation. So this is two in functional interface. So what does that mean? So two in functional interface is a one which takes any data type, but it converts the input to an integer. So, so this is this kind of an interface, functional interface, but the resultant output instead of string here, we are going to get the integer. Since since we knew for sure the resultant output is an integer, so we are going to say toInt functional interface. So this can be any data type. So let's take an example. ToInt functional interface. So what we are doing here is we are taking a string and then we are converting that string into an integer using integer dot value of string. And just to prove that what we converted is actually an integer, we're just adding 1 to it. Let's call this ToInt functional interface and see what output we are going to get now. Let's put this inside. If you put dot, it has a method called apply as an integer. So let's input the value at say 10. Mm, Why does it throw an error? This is ToInt functional interface. ToInt functional interface which takes string as an argument. This is not integer, so I have to put it as a string. Let's input the value as string. Let's give some space so that we can see the value. Let's run it now. Let's scroll this one and see. Hopefully this adds 1 to this string 10 after converting so that we can see the value as 11. Yeah, here we go. The value of ToInt functional interface is 11. So what it actually did, it took the string as an input and it converted to a integer. So now let's look at another variation. It's called int functional interface. So what does int functional interface does? So here it converted to two integer. Here it takes an input as an integer and then it can return the resultant value to anything. So here what we are doing is we are taking an integer as an input and we are converting as a string here. So let's look at an example for this as well. So since we have already seen enough examples of int functional interface, so we can combine these functional interfaces together. So let's take an example for combining. So here I'm calling add functional interface. If you see the add functional interface, it takes two integer and then what I'm going to do is and then is another method which takes another functional interface. If you see here, which converts to string functional interface. So what it does is it takes So the resultant value of this add functional interface is num1 plus num2 gets passed to this convert to string functional interface, and we are applying that method. So if I pass 10 and 25, it goes to this add functional interface. It comes as a result of 25, and on this 25 we are applying this convert to string functional interface. Here this 25 goes here, and this gets converted into a string, and plus we are concatenating a sentence called is a string, so we will get 25 is a string. So that is exactly what we have already run this multiple times. We should say uh, yeah, sorry, 25 plus 10, 35 is a string, is the resultant value we get. So let's summarize everything together now. So what we learned is we learned what is interface and what is functional interface and what are the various types of functional interface. We had normal functional interface, which takes one argument and returns its a result, and bifunctional interface, which takes two inputs, and toInt, which converts any argument to integer, and IntFunctional interface, which takes in only integer as a argument. It converts to any return type. Yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching this. Thank you.